Hey there and welcome back. It's time to jump into the darken blending mode group. So within this group, everything is going to make your image darker, and anything that's white on these layers is going to be completely transparent. So the first blending mode in our darken group is also called darken. Now here's basically how it works. You basically have this layer, the layer that you're working on, and the underlying layers, right? It takes a look at your underlying layers, and if they are darker than this layer, then it's not going to show up. If these pixels are lighter than this layer, then it's going to show up. So there's no blending really happening at all. It's just saying like, hey, if this is going to be darker, then make it visible. If it's going to be lighter, then it's going to be invisible. So the darken blending mode it's got some like rough transition, so it's not the most widely used when you're going to be darkening, but let's go ahead and show you guys how to work it in a practical example. So here in our sample images, let's go to chapter 303 darken, and we've got two images. Let's go ahead and open those up. So opening those up, we have a person doing yoga, and then we have a sky. So I'm just going to use my move tool and hold shift and click and drag from one image to another one, and then we're going to be changing our layer blend mode from normal to darken. Now here, as you can see in the darken blending mode, let's just go right down to about here to where we can tell, especially right over here. You can see there's not much of an actual blend going on. Literally this layer is just showing up anywhere where this layer is lighter than this layer. So like these feet, for instance, right? That's like the feet are lighter than what is on this layer. So it's just going to show up. Like literally, it's just showing up there. Now, you can see on our subject's clothing, it's dark clothing, so this layer literally just does not show up there. Okay, so there's not much blending happening here. It's literally like whether it's going to show up or not based on the light levels of the underlying layer. Now, in this case, we do have like a kind of a dark foreground here, and then it gets pretty light in our background. So if I make this visible, it's pretty obvious that this darken group is going to be visible here where the sky is, right? Because it's darker than the sky. So what I'm going to do is click on our layer mask right here. We're going to use our gradient tool. So let's hit G for the gradient tool. I'm going to use a linear gradient, and let's go ahead and make sure we're using our foreground to transparent. That just goes from your foreground color, which is right here, to transparent. Let's hit OK, and then I'm going to hit, I'm just going to switch them. I'm going to click here. So I'm going to make my foreground color black. Okay, now I have a black to transparent gradient, and when you put black on a layer mask, it makes things invisible. So this is just going to go invisible to visible. So let's start here on the bottom. I'm just going to click here and then hold shift and then drag up there. There we go. And what that's doing is just putting a black area here that's going to fade into white. So if I hold Alt or Option and look at my layer mask, that's all the layer mask looks like. It's just it's fading from black to white. And in this case, it's just hiding the bottom part, because obviously, you know, if I disable the layer mask by holding shift and clicking on it, obviously we don't want that to be visible because it looks horrible. But in this case, we can use our darken blending mode to just have our sky blend into the existing sky there. Now, I'd probably go ahead and lower the opacity just a little bit to help it look more realistic. But here we have a good example of how to use our darken blending mode. So we have a fairly light sky, and this layer is simply just going to show up over the sky. So darken blend mode basically just looks at each of the color channels on the underlying layers, and it's going to say, hey, is that darker than this layer? And if it is darker, this layer is not going to show up there. And if it's not darker, then this layer is going to show up there. So that's how we use our darken blending mode. Now, when it comes to darkening, the most commonly used darken blending mode is multiply, and that's in our next video. So we'll see you guys then.